WM32Football podcast. Today we are going to be joined again by a familiar face and a familiar voice to many. So today I've been joined by Nelson Ntumba. You may remember Nelson from our North London Derby special podcast that we did earlier on in the season, previewing that particular game. So Nelson, unfortunately for you, I'm going to say on this one, especially with recent events, you are an Arsenal fan. For those that didn't watch that particular podcast, so how long has your association been with the red half of North London?
First of all, Wes, pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. In terms of my association with Arsenal, I've been an Arsenal fan since, I believe, 2005.
2005. So we're looking at around, 15 years now?
Yep, 15 years, yep.
Nice. So what was that first game that you went to? Talk me through it. Was it at Highbury, or was it at the Emirates? And what were your memories from that day?
To be fair, so growing up, living in a working class living with a working class family, it was kind of difficult to attend Arsenal games. So growing up, I watched a lot of Arsenal's games on TV, and if I could find any streams, I could find any streams. But I remember my first ever game, believe it or not, was very late in the year 2014, and that was an Emirates Cup pre-season game, and it was the season that we had signed Alexis Sanchez. So that was the first time I got to see a superstar live on stage. I mean, live on the pitch. And I remember feeling like a buzz because it was my first ever game. Obviously, I wish I could have went to Highbury, but it was still exciting being able to just go watch the Arsenal play. So it was a game against Benfica, and would you believe it or not, it was the game that you would never, ever see again or hear again was Yaya Sanogo scoring 4 goals. 4 goals, would you believe it, Wes? 4. So it was an amazing experience. And like I said, I got to see a superstar play, and just the atmosphere, obviously back then, and just seeing it, the build up to the game and how Arsenal presents itself, which I thought was class. It was really exciting, and I'll definitely never forget that game. And I remember going with my dad and my brothers. So that was a nice experience to share with them too.
Nice. I don't think many people would odds Yaya Sanogo scoring a goal, let alone 4. I don't think he bagged in his time. You mentioned there you went to that particular game with your dad and your brothers. When you do go, Nelson, to games, is it a family affair? Do you go on your own, or is it just maybe you or your dad or you and your brothers? What's it like when you go to a game?
So the majority of time that I've been, it has been with my brothers and my dad. My dad is also an Arsenal fan too, so it was nice to. He's obviously an old man, so I thought I told him come on, Dad, come along, because it would be really good for him to kind of experience the atmosphere there is in the stadium. Me and my brothers were about 2 years apart, so we've been Arsenal fans since we were young boys. So yeah, it was cool. So the majority of the time it's been with my brothers, but I have gone to the odd occasion home game by myself. So yeah, it kind of varies, to be fair. If there's tickets available for all of us to go, then we can go. But if not, then it will just be myself and my brother. Yeah.
Nice. I can sort of envisage like a family affair kind of thing, and making a bit of a day of it, like you say, with your brothers and your dad and whatnot. When you do go, Nelson, are there any rituals or superstitions that you do, or is it literally just going to the game and then coming home?
On the day of the game, the day before the game, I know for sure that it would just be a simple prayer. I pray to God, and then the day of the game, I'd wake up again and pray to God. And then before the match, I just look up to the heavens and just hope that he's answered my prayers, obviously, and then the game begins. So that would be like a ritual that I would normally do in general, like if I would go, to attend a game. Nothing. I have no crazy like superstitions or anything about that. No.
No lucky pants, no lucky socks, no lucky shirts, nothing like that.
I mean, of course, during any game, I'd go and I'd wear the shirt for sure. I definitely want to represent or wear the colours of red. But in terms of just like crazy superstitions. No, there's no sort of socks. Yeah, no sort of like lucky black anything. Yeah, it's just mainly just the prayer and just hope that God has answered those prayers.
Yeah, I think God might have been missing and especially in recent times with Arsenal. Obviously, it's been on a bit of a decline of late. So, yeah, you might want to start going again and start praying to God a bit more.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
What would you say then, Nelson, is probably the best game that you've been to, or I might change this, or what that you've witnessed? Because obviously, I'd like to say, that you don't particularly go as often as you would like.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there obviously that you've watched games a lot on TV and stuff like that. So what would you say is the best one that you've witnessed? I'm going to go with.
Yeah, so in terms of I've witnessed a lot growing up. I think the first game that I'd say the best game that I've witnessed was the 2-1 win against Barcelona in 2011. It was the Champions League first leg. And watching that game live, me and my brothers, we all made sure that we'd switch it on ITV, not 7:30, and program started, and we were just like, we were all sweating and just, I'll never forget that day. And just watching the game and the squad that we had, we knew we were capable definitely of beating Barca with the squad and the attack that we had, with the likes of obviously Fabregas, Nasri, Walcott, Van Persie, Nicholas Bentner, would you believe, and obviously Andre Arshavin. And just watching that game was a nail biter, and obviously seeing the best player in the world play, like, obviously I can't imagine what those people at the stadium went through who were there, like, live themselves, and seeing the best player gracefully, like, just move with the ball, because he was something else, absolutely something else. And every time he had the ball in possession, as well as, the likes of Iniesta and Xavi, you just thought, wow, these lot are ridiculously good. But I'll never forget the cheers and the celebrations that we did when Arshavin scored the winning goal. And just, I'm a big fan on commentary, and I always feel like there's certain commentaries, like certain commentators that really understand the night or the game, the importance of the game, the significance. So hearing Clive Tilsley on that day, I'll never forget. And I still like go back on YouTube and just watch the game over and over. And obviously there was a special young boy in midfield at the time who was growing up in the Arsenal academy. The name of Jack Wilshere, played an absolutely amazing game. And I think to this day, Arsenal fans will continue to laud his performance that he did against the best in the world. So that was the best game that I've witnessed in terms of going through emotion, quality of the game. Just, that's the best.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that particular game as well, and it was like, you're talking about a Barcelona side that had, Valdez in goal, Puyol, Piqué, Busquets, Xavi, and Iniesta as a midfield three, and then, the main man Messi up top, and I think David Villa was in that side, Pedro was playing. So this was a Barcelona team that was really at its peakest, if you like.
Definitely.
And I remember watching that game, and it was just ridiculous. And obviously you mentioned there watching Messi play, and I've been fortunate enough to watch him play and pretty much tear Tottenham apart at Wembley last season in the Champions League, and found myself watching Messi as opposed to watching the game, which is a very, very rare thing.
Right.
And it's like you just ended up watching him, and I've come out of that game with my dad, and I was just there like, what have I just witnessed? The result was secondary, and it's never usually secondary. I was just there like, what have I just witnessed? Because he was that good, and I didn't realise you could be that good, and get away with being more dangerous to a team and an opposition when you haven't got the ball. I think that's what probably sets Messi apart for me from Ronaldo, because I saw them both in the space of a year, and one delivered and one was underwhelming. Really, I don't know if the results match that feeling, because obviously Tottenham had lost to Barcelona and beaten Real Madrid, but it was just an honor. It was just an honor and a pleasure to be able to watch Messi and say that you've watched Lionel Messi live. And whatnot. And obviously with that, you've mentioned that is probably the best one that you've witnessed. What is one of the worst games that you've witnessed as a Gooner?
Oh, no doubt. two games come to mind. I'm going to put two in there because I just the feeling of both those games were okay. First game was the 2006 Champions League final against Barcelona. That was heartbreaking. That was like my first. Like I said, I started supporting the club in 2005. That was my first year, really investing, committing to, supporting the Red. So that season was a very underwhelming season. We didn't finish. I think we finished in the top 4 places, I believe. But that run to the Champions League final was amazing, beating the likes of Juventus on the way, and obviously that really nail-biting semi-final with Villarreal and Lehmann making that save in the second leg. And then we reached the final, and we thought, you know what, we've really got a chance. Like, this is former invincible squad. We've actually got a chance. And when you've got somebody like Thierry Henry in your squad, then you've always got a chance. That was my belief. And obviously they had the best player in the world at the time, who was one of my favourite players of all time, Ronaldinho. And that was the only person that I was really afraid of, as well as the likes of Samuel Eto'o, and you also got Puyol in defence. So watching that game live as well, and then the game started in the worst way possible with Lehmann getting sent off, and I just thought, I just really didn't like. That was the first time I've ever seen an Arsenal player get sent off, but the fact that it was in a significant game such as the final, it just was really difficult to comprehend. I was like, how does this game continue? Like, you may as well just give the trophy to Barca. And then, would you believe that Sol Campbell scores to make it 1-0? I'm like, wow, we've really got a chance here. Like, I remember just screaming the place. I'm like, yeah! And then...
Sorry, Nelson. Who scored? I don't recognise the name. I'm afraid.
It was a certain. I think he goes by the name of Judas. A certain Sol Campbell.
Okay, Judas. Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah. So he was the one that bagged the goal, and I thought we really had a chance here. And like, if you look back at the game, we actually had better chances, and we actually had the most close chances. And like I said, you always have a chance when you got Thierry Henry in the squad, and I think he played one of the games of his life. But there was a chance that I'll never forget where he went through on goal, and I thought, this is him. Like, opens his body out, does his usual, but he missed, and I thought, wow, is that really going to cost us? And then, last 15 minutes they bagged 2 and they won the trophy. And obviously to this day it hurts. It really hurts. So that was one game. The second game that really, really hurt was the Carling Cup final against Birmingham City. Now, on paper, we should have won that game. But I think the reason why football's the beautiful game is that anything can happen. And credit to Birmingham City, because I'm one of, I think, a few Arsenal fans who actually give them credit. They stuck to their plan, and kept on fighting. And obviously, we made the mistake that helped them score with Koscielny and Szczesny, but that game was I think that hurt because, like I said, that was also the same season we beat Barcelona, that I talked about, the best game that I witnessed. And it seemed as though we were going on the up with the squad that we had, with the likes of Samir Nasri coming up, dazzling through defences, Fabregas leading the squad as captain, the youngest Arsenal captain. You got Van Persie, striker at the time, Walcott. Everyone was coming into their own. Alex Song, Matthew. We just had the squad, I think, and we were pushing on for the title as well. But after we lost that game, the season derailed. Everything declined. We got knocked out of the Champions League, got knocked out of the FA. Everything just went to shambles. So I think that was a real turning point. And obviously the season after that, in that summer, Fabregas left, went to Barca. So I feel like if we had won that cup, a lot of things would have changed. We still would have had the core squad that we had back then now. And I think fortunes would have been, better. So those were the two games that, in terms of my Arsenal experience, were the worst. Yeah, those two.
Yeah, I think I remember watching both, and first to say there was a massive, massive cheer in my household when not only Henrik Larsson scored to give Barcelona the Champions League, but an even bigger one, you would probably say, when Obafemi Martins put that one in. I think it was probably more on the Obafemi Martins one because we couldn't believe the mistake that had happened between the Arsenal back line, and it was just like, oh my god, like, what's happened here? Like, oh my word, what has happened? And it was almost that feeling for me. It was like, I've got a lot of friends that are Arsenal fans, and it was like, what, you couldn't beat Birmingham in a cup final. And I actually think Birmingham went down that season as well.
They did, yeah, they did.
So yeah, because if I remember right, Pavlyuchenko sent them down, and he has hit one of the most outrageous strikes that you've probably seen, that you've ever seen, to send them down. And yeah, so I remember those two games especially, probably for better reasons than Arsenal fans, for sure. Who then, Nelson? Obviously, this will be quite an interesting one for you because of the time in which you started following Arsenal. But I have a feeling I know the answer for this one, but I'm hoping maybe for a slight surprise. Who would you say your favourite player of all time is for Arsenal, and why?
There is no doubt that this is I don't have to think twice about this, because he was the reason why. Like, he's my hero. Like, he was one of the reasons why I started playing football. I tried to model my game around him, and his evolution to superstar striker. And obviously, he's Arsenal's record all-time goal scorer, and that is obviously Thierry Henry. I speak French as well, so there was also that relatability towards him too. So it just felt like he was another one of like an extended family member. So it was really nice to be able to see his elegance and the way he played for the badge. People forget that he actually played for the badge. It wasn't, his individual brilliance. Like, he actually put the team first. To this day, nobody has beaten his assist records of 20 assists. I think he was the only player that season. He's the only player ever in history of the Premier League to have 20 goals and 20 plus assists. So it just shows how he really put the team first. And we all know about his instinctive finishing, his outrageous pace. Obviously began as a winger. Wenger brought him, managed him at Monaco first. Like, everything Thierry Henry I have seen, like his Vava Voom adverts, Renault, everything you want to know. Like, he was, for me, the greatest, and still is to this day. No current player has ever matched his sort of contribution to the club. In my opinion. But obviously, Arsenal fans will make the argument that the likes of Tony Adams, Patrick Vieira, Dennis Bergkamp, Ian Wright as well, righty. So they could argue that those are his favourite players. But for me personally, I'm just gonna have to go with Thierry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had a feeling that the great man was gonna be said there, and I don't think there's gonna be too many Arsenal fans that are gonna disagree with you about that. And obviously he does have a famous statue outside the Emirates.
He does.
Of a goal whereby he's run half the length of the pitch on Derby Day. Still gets me to this day because I still think that someone should have brought him down on the halfway line.
They should have tactical foul, but Jamie. I remember that goal. Jamie Redknapp could not keep up, and yeah, I don't know how Tottenham fans personally feel about the celebrate. Like, cause it gives me shades of. I think that's where Adebayor got his idea for his celebration against us when he played for City, when he ran the full length of the pitch to just slide in front of the Tottenham fans. But who knows? Like, I mean, that game, the statue is, he deserved it, and you could tell his connection to the club is genuine, is proper genuine. Because I remember the speech he did when they unveiled the statue to him, and he started tearing down, and you could just tell, the club means a lot to him. And then we forget that he actually came back for a second stint at the club and scored on his debut, like his second debut for the club. And no one will ever forget that goal either. And his last game for the club as well. Like, oh my gosh, like, the great man, like you said, against Sunderland, that winner against Sunderland. So no, he's done some extraordinary things. And for me, the greatest.
So just quickly on that point, you mentioned obviously him scoring the goal against Leeds in the FA Cup. What was your feeling when that was about to happen and when it did happen?
Like, obviously everyone said that it's a story written in the stars. Like, everyone just thought that it's gonna happen. Like, but I just thought, you know what, let's forget about, no offense to him at the time when he came back to the club. he wasn't his, he was way past his peak. Had finished his kind of career in a sense with New York Red Bulls, and then came back. And I think many fans were dreaming of his like his electrifying years, as Martin Tyler would say, electrifying. But no, he was obviously way past it. But you could he for me is like fine wine in a sense that he still gets better with age in terms of psychologically. So he still understands the game, still understands all the tactics, and that would definitely be a plus in the game, because obviously he would be able to figure out his positioning. His positioning was one of the best when he was up top. So that just before, when I think Alex Song had the ball, found him in an open. I don't know how Alex Song found him, but people forget like the first touch that Thierry produced to then open up his body and then do his trademark kind of in-swinger around the goalkeeper far post. Like when you saw the ball rolling, you just thought it can't be, and then it happened, and then I was one of probably millions of Arsenal fans worldwide that went hysterical. I mean, went crazy when he scored. So it was definitely a beautiful homecoming, and I know he will never forget it. So like I said, the great man.
So from legendary status to somebody or a player that you feel may get there, who would you say is your current favourite Arsenal player, and why? I know this one might be a bit tricky.
Oh, this is a good question, because I will start off with my current player, because this was a former favourite player, because this was somebody that actually no, I'm gonna stick with him. My favourite player, again, is a bit similar to Thierry Henry, but my favourite player is Lacazette. Many Arsenal fans hearing this might be like, what's he talking about, especially with what he's produced this season? But he had a reputable goal scoring record in France, and people can say, Farmers League, quality of the game, speed, intensity is not as good as the Premier League, which is true. But to be able to still produce the number of goals that he did, and the amount of players that come from Ligue 1 and actually come to the Premier League, they actually do pretty well. The likes of Martial still doing well. Obviously, Thierry is an example. French players actually do have easier time, like Drogba as well as another example, who came from the league and found it quite easy to adapt to the league. He's done pretty well. So Lacazette is my favourite player, not just because of his goal-scoring instincts, but his ability to bring his other teammates into play. I think that's what makes him so unique. Yes, people will point to Aubameyang's goal-scoring record and the fact that because if without his goals, we'd probably be in a relegation battle right now this season at Arsenal. But Lacazette, I think, brings everything together. I think this season, unfortunately, he hasn't gone past his ankle injury, which he suffered earlier this season. That was, I think, after that amazing North London derby, which was 2-2. I think you remember as well, like earlier this season. He scored that game, but I think he aggravated his ankle injury. So I don't think he's been the same ever since. Because last year under Unai Emery, he was outrightly he was the player of the season. Fans voted him the player of the season, and he obviously took a year to adjust the season before when he first signed. He scored on his debut straight away against Leicester, that crazy 4-3 game. Instinctive header from a really bad El Neni cross. Like, people forget that was a really bad cross. But he stuck it in bottom corner. And there's something about him that gives me shades of Ian Wright. Just his movement off the ball. But instinctively, he's always had it. And I will still stick by him. The player that I thought I was going to mention and give up on Lacazette was Nicolas Pepe. But I think over time, Pepe will probably overtake him and probably become my favourite player. But so far right now, I'm going to stick with Alex Lacazette. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Pepe there. What is it about him you feel that would make him not only your favourite player, but potentially a fan's favourite?
Well, I think it comes down to reproducing the form that he showed the season that we bought him for, which was his Liga season. I think I can't remember how much he bagged, but he did bag over 20 goals and made over 15 assists, I believe. I may be wrong, but he was very productive, which is my point. And he was electrifying in terms of his pace, his dribbling. It's been a while since Arsenal have had a player of his quality that can pick up the ball from the halfway line and just decide, you know what, forget you guys as my teammates. I'm just gonna go past everybody. And I've been lucky enough to attend more games this season, and have actually seen him live, and his dribbling is magical. Like, as soon as he has the ball, it's glued to his feet. And when he starts driving at people, you see everybody start rising to like his presence, because he brings something, especially when we've played lackluster and there's no attacking verve, and we're struggling to create chances. He just picks the ball up and decides, okay, I'm running at you, and that brings people to their feet, and people love that about him. That kind of fearlessness to be like, yeah, I trust my ability to go past one or two. But I think for him to become the legend or a fan favorite at the club, it needs to be consistently performing at a high level and reproducing that form that he did at Ligue 1, where we know he can be productive and score potentially 20 plus goals like Raheem Sterling's doing now with Pep, and produce your 15 plus assists as well. So I think that would be something that I think, unfortunately, fans will judge him on, which is his goal contributions. But he can put in a defensive shift too, and he can create chances as well. So I think that would be something that, yeah, people. That's how I think personally. That's how we see him and how we judge him on. So hopefully he can do that. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, really good insight there, Nelson, because I think Pepe's coming for quite a lot of criticism. Coming from Lille, massive transfer fee. Obviously, Arsenal's record signing off the back of it as well.
Yeah.
And like you say, I guess time will tell if if and when he does, finally produce the goods that made you guys shell out all that money on him. What would you then, Nelson, say that your most memorable moment? I have a feeling I know what it's going to be, unfortunately for me. But what would you say your most memorable moment has been being an Arsenal fan?
I definitely want to put all the wins against. You know what? The most memorable moment, obviously all the games that we beat Tottenham is a memorable moment, but I think everyone would say, and I think everyone would agree with me, if they are thinking the same thing, if we're on the same wavelength, I think is we talk about the Invincible season, and we talk about the fact that we went unbeaten, and the fact that the way we won the title and where we won it was yeah. I think you know what I'm talking about. I think the game where we secured the league title at White Lane was probably the most memorable moment. That is me knowing the history of Arsenal and knowing that we did that, because obviously I told you that I began supporting Arsenal a year after the Invincibles, so 2005. So I wasn't really I had known that we had done the Invincibles, but I don't think I was invested as an Arsenal fan then, because I was still kind of back and forth with what team I support, for my future, basically. But when I'm looking back at the history of the club and the greatness that we've had at our club, I would say, historically, I would say that Invincible season. However, knowing that I supported them after the Invincible season, I would say another memorable moment was actually when we ended our trophy drought in 2014 and won the FA Cup against Hull City, because that game was actually was a nail biter, because we had obviously, like I said, one of our worst games was the game against Birmingham in the Carling Cup final, 2011. 3 years later, we have another opportunity now to put that to bed. That's all in the past, and we can actually end the trophy drought. And I remember the day before I had school, and everyone was coming up to me, and I remember I told one of my best friends at the time, because I had broken up. This is I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I had broken up with my ex-girlfriend, and I said, okay, because I've broken up with her, Arsenal are going to win a trophy. That's what I said. And I believed it from the day that we had won the FA Cup final. And then someone came to me the day before the game and said, okay, Nelson, what's your score? And I said, we're going to win 3-2. I said, we're going to go down 2-0, and then we're going to score 3 goals somehow and win. That was just my prediction. Whereas I had no idea that this was the emotions that day. I was like, why did I actually predict that? Like, I should have just predicted like a comprehensive like 4-1 victory or something. But I decided to go for the craziest comeback of all comebacks. And yeah, just watching us go down 2-0 against Hull City, and then Santi Cazorla scoring an important goal before half time. I thought, yeah, this comeback is definitely on, and I knew that we'd get there. I think that Aaron Ramsey scored the winner that game. That was his best season in terms of personal contributions as well. So historically, I'd go for the Invincibles, but me being the fan that I am, and since I was an Arsenal fan, I would go with the also the 2014 FA Cup final. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, I had a feeling that that particular season was gonna get a mention because, like I say, most of my mates are Arsenal fans and they still go on about it now, and I'm like, yeah, whatever it's been, it's done. You've all right. You've had a few FA Cup wins since, but trophy wise, you've not really done a lot. So yeah, you can have it, but yeah, kind of thing. So as you can tell, I'm over it. So yeah, so we're going to go from the most memorable moment and giving you some incredible highs to giving you now and giving you a reminder of some incredible lows at Arsenal. But what would you say is the lowest point in supporting Arsenal?
It's tough because I don't think you can rank them. There's a lot. Like, I think I'd mentioned about the Champions League final earlier being the worst game I've witnessed, but also the lowest point in terms of the club and just like being so close to European glory, being crowned as the best team in Europe. I think there's numerous lowest moments that I could mention. You could talk about losing to Spurs 5-1 in the Carling Cup semi-final. That's a low point. The Birmingham FA Cup the Carling Cup final. The season that we've had before Mikel Arteta was appointed, that is a low point because I think people actually underestimate Arsene Wenger's departure. That's another low point, I think, because he really he was the one that set up the culture here at Arsenal, like what we are about, the class that he kind of brought along every single day when he was coaching the players with his like laissez-faire kind of approach to his coaching styles, to his coaching. So I think that is another low point that people kind of underestimate as well. So I don't think I have one answer to that. I think there's a lot that we could point out that is a low point. So yeah, I think I could just name so many, but I think I'd leave that to numerous kind of moments.
Nice. You mentioned there about Arsene Wenger. Would you say that I know he's been there a long time and was probably there for the majority of your time. So is he probably the best manager then that you've had?
Yeah, he's definitely the best manager that I've seen at the club. And we've had some great managers in our past, but for me, he was number one. Like I said, what he brought in terms of his revolutionary ideas, especially because I think the season before he was at Gamba Osaka in Japan, came and saw what was over there in Japan and brought his revolutionary ideas over at the club, and you could tell that the players with their stubbornness were very reluctant to follow his kind of methods and the way he wanted to go about coaching, and how he thought the team would be successful. But they gave in, listened, and obviously Ian Wright is one of the players who still talks about to this day in terms of Wenger's ideas coming to fruition, and the nutrition that the players also got within their personal performance. Like, it was all, yeah. I think that's what makes Wenger probably the greatest manager I believe that Arsenal's ever had. He's obviously the most successful of all time, but in terms of also, I think for me, I don't measure greatness just in terms of the performance. So we can talk about the titles that he's won, him being the manager of the most FA Cup wins, all of that, the teams that he's produced. but I think people need to also remember the impact that he's had on the game of football, the style of play that we had as well. Just that free flowing football is something that people will always associate with him. Like I said, his laissez-faire approach with his coaching, allowing the players to kind of figure it out themselves, I think is another unique kind of coaching style, because many times players do look to managers for approval or sort of like guidance, but he sort of let the players do their thing, and that obviously helped players evolve. And obviously we've had some of the best players ever at this club during his era. So I think he also had an impact as well in terms of the community. So on and off the pitch as well, he definitely was a legend. So I think that's why I'd go for Wenger as the greatest manager of all time.
Yeah,
at Arsenal, just to be precise,
Yeah.
at Arsenal, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think anybody really, especially more current Arsenal fans, are gonna really disagree. I don't think they've got much in terms of choice. However, but I think your reasoning and your rationale as to behind why I think is probably can resonate with the majority of Arsenal fans. But then, as we know, Wenger could be quite frustrating at times as a manager. So with that, did you feel that he was also potentially the worst that you've seen at Arsenal for those frustrations, especially in the transfer market, especially?
Of course, I like that you brought up that question, because, like I said, we could always, now that he's retired, now that he's no longer at the club, we can always remember his high points. But I think it's very important that every manager comes with their stubbornness and comes with their reluctance to spend. And he was definitely, like, we're talking a class of his own when it came to stubbornness and reluctance to just dip into the transfer market. I never got it. I never understood. But then I realized that growing up, and when I did more research about him, I realized that he had an economics degree. And like, knowing that he had that, I felt, okay, it made sense why he was always interested in making more money at the club, especially, like, I think what we don't give him credit for is how he handled the transition from Highbury to the Emirates. And I think that's probably where his degree came in place, in terms of his knowledge of how to help the club be quite stable during those years. And obviously he couldn't really dip into the transfer market. But when we had the money, I was so frustrated why he didn't go in for certain signings. Like, I think every fan, doesn't matter if you're Arsenal or not an Arsenal, whether you're Arsenal or not an Arsenal supporter, like, if you could make a whole 18-man squad of the players that Arsenal were linked to during Wenger's era. We're talking Ronaldo, Messi, Di Maria, Yaya Toure. There's so much, like, I could put on that list. And that squad is enough to win you back-to-back Premier League titles. We're talking Champions Leagues. So yeah, he was very annoying in the sense that he was stubborn, because I mentioned about his coaching styles and how it was revolutionary, but it comes to a point where we need to now adapt in life. And I think that was mainly probably one of his weaknesses, to be able to adapt to the current settings of the Premier League, especially with the way the game was played now. There was less focus on kind of possession-based football, I think, especially in his latter years at the club. And it was more on, like, buying players that had a lot more athleticism, and it was all sort of a physical kind of thing with players. It was less about the intangibles and more about, like, just having it there and then. Wenger was definitely patient, and I think that's something that we can give him credit for. But it's, I think that led to more stubbornness during his time at the club. I think personally he should have left the year that we ended the trophy drought in 2014. I think that was the perfect send-off for him. He had won a trophy, and I thought, what other better way than to leave than on a high? Because then I thought at that time we would have gotten a great manager in his prime. I always wanted Jurgen Klopp. Obviously, Liverpool are now reaping the rewards of that. Or Diego Simeone, who is at Atletico and won the La Liga trophy with them in 2015. So, he's had some bad moments for sure, and that's all I can remember during my time at Arsenal. But I think his highs definitely outweigh the lows. Yeah.
And what was it like for you being an Arsenal fan under Unai Emery? Was it frustrating? Was it good? Was it a case of just getting out? What was it like for you as an Arsenal fan under Unai Emery?
I think with what Unai Emery did, like you can argue, yes, he is probably the worst manager we've had. But at the same time, like I don't know, he was given a 3-year contract. He obviously didn't um, go out play out until the end of it. The first season, I believe we definitely overachieved, especially in the sense that we went to the Europa League final. I didn't think we'd get there. I thought it would be better to focus on the league and to get top four through the league first. Um, I think when he initially came, I think it was great. I think the players also felt they were definitely refreshed, having new ideas from the manager and bringing his kind of coaching team as well to the club. He definitely had some ideas, but I definitely think the language barrier was probably one of his biggest was a contributing factor to why he was never successful at the club because you hear in interviews and you hear in articles and you read that players still were struggling to understand him. That there had to be some sort of like you could say intermediary in the middle that like had to liaise with both the players and the manager. Like Freddie Ljungberg, who obviously took over as interim after Unai left, was that guy at times. Like there was an article that Saka said that who's doing great this season. That he had to get Freddie to kind of like assure him, okay, this is what has been told for you to do, because like the language barrier was an issue, and players also took the mick out of the way he sort of coached and the way he spoke. Like good evening, we all know about his famous good evening, like and his good morning sort of stuff, and that's been made into memes. So I think it was quite unfortunate in terms of circumstances with Unai at the club. Um, I think if he had the squad that he wanted, for sure, we definitely would have performed better. But he had to come in and deal with what we had. And I think at the time, the club also wanted a manager who could kind of deal with budget restrictions, because I don't think we had the funds to dip into the market like he would have wanted. Every manager dreams of having the board of someone like City who can spend millions of dollars, or like an Abramovich, but we still had to kind of be restricted to what we could get. But he did okay at his first season. He did okay, but second season, I think, again, he didn't adapt. He definitely did not improve. Or for me, it felt like there was no commitment to make the club better in terms of like making sure that the issue of the language barrier had disappeared, because it was still there. It was still prominent at the club. So I think that I think that it was a struggle with Unai at the club, and fans definitely got impatient because they wanted instant gratification. They wanted success right there and then, I think, as well. But at the same time, you have to. I think another factor to a manager leaving the club is also the players. The players definitely cannot be proud of the performances that they put in, regardless of whoever the manager is. Like, you as players should just play for the badge. And I think they were also a factor to why Unai left. I think in the last few games before he departed, like, you could tell the atmosphere within the dressing room was definitely sort of, let's not play to our best, so Unai can definitely go and we'll just start again from there, which is very disappointing as especially for any aspiring young football player. Like, you should always give 100%, in my opinion. No matter who your manager is, always give your all, because the fans are the ones who pay your wages, all of that. Like, they help the club survive. So it's kind of disappointing that that player power is there in a sense. But no, I wish Unai all the best, obviously, with his future endeavours, and yeah, hopefully he doesn't come back. Yeah.
You sounded like a media person then when they put out the club statement when a manager gets sacked. We'd like to thank Unai and his backroom staff for all their hard work. And like that. But no, excellent. I think excellent. And I think a calm if you like, summary of Unai Emery's time at Arsenal. If anybody has seen our Save Our Season edition, you will know that Connor completely loses his head with Unai Emery and goes into a 17-minute rant on Unai Emery.
Yeah.
No, that was a bit more calm and a bit more measured. So with that, then, Nelson, obviously you've mentioned that you didn't get to go to Highbury, but you've been to the Emirates. What would you say is your favourite ground apart from the Emirates that you've been to and that you've come across?
Oh, that's a good question. I've come across numerous over my time. Well, it's a really good question. I've been to a few actually. In terms of domestically, in terms of clubs that I've been to, I think the Etihad Stadium probably is my number one. Yeah, the Etihad Stadium. I've been outside Spurs' ground, the new ground, and it actually looks really nice in terms of aesthetically and what you guys have definitely like put into making sure that the club, in terms of in this modern day era, like make sure that Tottenham is stable, and especially what you can offer in the stadium, especially with your partnership with the NFL. I think that's great. Especially to bring that over and to have that kind of partnership, that's one of a kind. I think you guys are the first. Yeah, you guys are the first to have done that and to have that kind of partnership. But the Etihad for me was probably the best that I've been to. I've seen Old Trafford. I've seen the likes of I've been to Stamford Bridge, Anfield. I've been to Goodison Park. I've been to many, but Etihad stands out. I think because I was lucky enough during my time at university to work at the stadium, so I definitely got an insight to how the club was run, and I think just like how Spurs did with building their new stadium, I think the way City was run, especially since Sheikh Mansour's come to the club in 2008, you could tell that he really invested in trying to make sure that City was one of the top clubs in the world, for let alone the domestically. So the way the club was run and seeing how everything was kind of like planned in terms of match days and just like the overall structure at the club and the stadium. The stadium is beautiful. Their pitch was one of the best pitches I've seen. And obviously, in terms of what the stadium holds and just kind of the facilities that's available there, I think for me personally, I'd have to say the Etihad Stadium. Yeah, that's domestically. Now, I've been to some internationally, and I think my favorite one internationally has to be. Let me think. I'll probably say Stade de France. I was lucky enough to go to Stade de France whilst I was in France on a family trip, and that was. I think just probably because of pure numbers and how much more capacity it has than the likes of the Etihad and Emirates. Yeah, and obviously just being able to witness French atmosphere was amazing. French atmosphere is like you could argue is better than what we've got on right now here in England, but Stade de France was one of the best stadiums I had been to. Yeah, just because of the atmosphere alone. Yeah, so I'd probably put them two. So domestically, Etihad, and internationally, I'll put Stade de France.
I think they are two fantastic arenas, if you like. I wouldn't really class them as a stadium. I'd probably go as far as to say they are arenas. Obviously, the Etihad has hosted, concerts and everything else like that. I believe Stade de France hosted other sporting events like rugby and things like that. So, yeah, I'd probably say two good arenas there for sure. From your favourite, then to your least favourite, where you've probably looked at or you've been to a ground and you go, what a place this is, I can't wait to get out. That might be because your team's lost or the ground just isn't that great. What would you go for?
I don't know, because again, that's a good question. Because I think in terms of standard, most of the clubs that I've been to have been of a high standard in terms of Premier League pitches, Premier League grounds. I think they're all. I think they've. I can't honestly. I don't think I have an answer for that, because I'm a person who's quite. I'm quite open-minded, so I've never really approached the stadium to. I obviously understand, like, okay, if I compare it to the Arsenal's Emirates Stadium, I understand. Let's say if we go to a game against Bournemouth, I understand that their stadium isn't going to be as world class as ours, but at the same time, within their kind of in their with their standards and what they can offer, what their strengths are, they still have a beautiful stadium. So I've never had that kind of perspective and thought, you know, yeah, this is definitely a bad place to be, or even if we've lost, I've never kind of had that kind of mindset. I've always appreciated going to other stadiums. I think it's just another one to check off the been gone to stadium list, because I try and appreciate kind of every kind of stadium. They all have their own sort of culture. So I think my answer to that question is I don't have a worst stadium that I've been to. I don't. Yeah.
No, it's interesting that. I think obviously there's, when I've interviewed people on this previously, they've been able to say one ground for one reason or another. But I think it's quite interesting and quite refreshing that you say there that you're open-minded when going to a ground and actually you take into account the club's resources and what they can offer. I think a lot of people as fans, we go and we're like, God, what a place this is. I think subconsciously we do compare it to the club that we support. I'm quite fortunate to go and watch Tottenham, and the stadium there is, you said you've looked around it outside of it, and it's just an amazing stadium. But then I've been to other grounds, and I'm like, what a place this is! I can't wait to get out. But like I say, half the time I've probably lost, especially away grounds, since I've started going to away games, because we've not been great on the road. But no, for sure. Yeah, like I say, it's quite interesting that you make that point that you're actually quite open-minded about a club's resources. Final one from me then, Nelson, on this. What would you say your hopes are for next season? Obviously, Mikel is in charge now. So what are you hoping for from not only him but the players next season?
Well, I'll begin with Mikel first because he's been very refreshing since he's joined the club. And I initially wanted him to be appointed. I wanted us to take the risk and get him. Barca did the same when they recruited Pep, and he revolutionized the game with his tiki-taka. So I thought, why not go for Arteta? I get it. No experience, has no kind of credibility. So it's kind of, I think right now, most people kind of look for experience. So I think we were linked to Allegri, Ancelotti, I think Simeone briefly, but not as strong as Allegri and the others. So when obviously Unai left, I could only see one winner, and I wanted Mikel, and I'm glad we got our guy because he's fresh. He's a young manager. He gives me a vibe of Julian Nagelsmann at Schalke, I believe. I think he's at Schalke. Yeah, Schalke.
He's at Leipzig
sorry.
at the moment.
So Leipzig,
unfortunately
that's the
for
one.
me.
My bad. Leipzig. Yeah, that's the one. So Nagelsmann, when he initially was at Hoffenheim, was revolutionary in terms of like what he brought to the squad. So I think that sort of young energy is great for the players, and I think having been, you could say, an understudy to Pep, but also an apprentice and learning the ways in which I think the greatest skill that Arteta learnt being with Pep was his man management skills and how to improve on that. I think that you could argue that was probably one of Wenger's I wouldn't say weakest kind of attributes, but you didn't see much man management with him. But Arteta, you could tell, has great man management skills. Being a personal player himself and having played the game of football as well, being a professional player at the highest level, he did have some successful years with Arsenal as well as Everton. So I think with him being able to relate to the player on a personal level. We've had obviously a number of high-profile players such as Mahrez, Raheem Sterling, who have said that Arteta and Sane, who have kind of pointed out that Arteta's been a big reason why they've elevated their game to a higher level. So I think in terms of him, I think he should stick to what he knows, and I think he's smart enough to know when to dip into the market to get a player. So I think now, with what's going on with the pandemic, I think this is an opportunity for him to kind of sit down with his squad, with his coaching team, call them up and be like, okay, what can we do for next season? Where can we go? I think he already has a plan set in place, and the style that he wants to play, and also kind of getting the players to understand that this is his philosophy. If you're not with it, you can go, and that's it. And I think that authority is very crucial as well, and very pivotal in actually getting the players to understand that you're not in charge here. I am. So I think and I'm sure the players will come around and kind of get prepared and kind of mentally fit as well. In terms of the players, my hopes for next season is that we're psychologically better. I think that's one thing that first, I think that's how it starts in general. Like for any football player, if you're psychologically prepared and ready, then there's nothing stopping you, because the body just kind of follows. The body only follows what the mind does. So I think the players definitely need to psychologically get better. When I think that's what Mikel has brought into the squad. The team is now much more psychologically better in terms of dealing with situations when we're down. We don't lose our heads as much than when we were Unai Emery, and obviously the latter years of Arsene Wenger's era. So in terms of players, I think just better consistent performances, everyone committing to the project, to the idea that, okay, this is how we can move forward, and just being better teammates. I think my hopes are that everyone's better teammates, and I hate this sort of thing where it's understandable, you've got players that speak different languages, so they will go off in their groups. But I think the one thing that made City's back-to-back titles so successful was the fact that each player had a relationship with each other. I think Pep in his time there has kind of, you could say, forced the idea of everyone speaking English and everyone getting used to each other so they can understand like what makes this player tick, what makes this player tick. So I think my hopes for the players is that we could actually become better teammates and obviously perform better consistently. I think that's one thing that all Arsenal fans want, is for us to perform at a consistent level, and to give it all for the badge. I think that's one thing that we feed off. I think any fan, just like yourself, you can say that if you can see the player work for the badge and puts that in first and puts personal egos aside, I think the possibilities are endless. So that's sort of my thing that's my hope for next season. Obviously for us to finish in the top four, get back to the Champions League. I forgot to mention that. I couldn't leave without saying that. So yeah, I will definitely end it on there and say that, yeah, those are my hopes for next season.
Brilliant. Although, just want to pick up on that last point that you mentioned. Obviously, you mentioned playing for the badge. I think the last Arsenal player that said that ended up leaving and going to Bordeaux in Laurent Koscielny. So maybe not just playing for the badge. But no, Nelson, thank you ever so much for your time. And this may sound strange, me being from the better side of North London, but it's been a fantastic interview. Trying to get and learning about you as an Arsenal fan a little bit more. So guys, that is it from us. Don't forget we are on Spotify, so give us a follow on there. This will also be up on YouTube as well. So don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. The name is WM32Football. Nelson, thank you once again for your time.
Thank you very much, Wes. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem at all.